Ladies and gentlemen, imagine for a moment someone who thrives on controlling your every move, someone who feeds on your reactions, your attention, your approval. Now imagine breaking free, not with anger, not with revenge, but with something far more powerful: calm, self respect, and peace. Tonight, we're going to uncover the 4 things a narcissist can never get over, and along the way, reveal the roadmap to reclaiming your life, your power, and your freedom. By the end of this journey, you'll see not just how to survive, but how to thrive in a way they can never touch. A narcissist's sense of self is built almost entirely on control. Control over how they are seen, how others feel, and how situations unfold. It is not confidence that drives them, but fear. Fear of being insignificant, exposed, or powerless. Control becomes their armor. Through manipulation, charm, intimidation, or emotional withdrawal, they create a world where they feel superior and untouchable. As long as they can influence reactions, steer emotions, and dictate outcomes, they feel safe. When that control begins to slip, something profound happens inside them. It feels like suffocation. The loss of control is not just uncomfortable, it is destabilizing. Imagine someone who has always held the steering wheel suddenly realizing the car is moving without their hands. Panic sets in. They're carefully constructed. Identity depends on being the one who directs the narrative. Without that authority, they are forced to confront a terrifying truth. They are not as powerful as they believed. This is why emotional independence in others is so unsettling to them. When someone stops reacting, stops explaining themselves, stops trying to win approval, the narcissist loses their leverage. Silence becomes louder than argument. Calm becomes more threatening than confrontation. The absence of emotional response creates a vacuum they cannot fill. What truly breaks them is not rejection, but irrelevance. Control gives them purpose. Losing it leaves them facing their own emptiness. They may escalate, provoke, or play the victim in an attempt to regain dominance, but these are desperate acts, not strength. The more they try to tighten their grip, the more exposed their insecurity becomes. In contrast, the person who steps out of the controlled dynamic experiences liberation. Choosing self-respect over reaction shifts the power entirely. The narcissist is left grappling with the reality they cannot manipulate while the other person discovers something far more enduring than control: inner stability. That is the moment the illusion collapses, and the narcissist realizes control was never strength, it was survival. When control is lost, the next thing that unravels is the image. A narcissist cannot survive without the illusion of who they believe they are. Control allows them to manage perception, to decide how they are seen and admired. But once that control slips, once someone no longer reacts, no longer chases, no longer submits, the mask begins to crack. And what follows is far more threatening than losing power, being truly seen. A narcissist doesn't just want attention, they want admiration without scrutiny. The persona they project is carefully curated, polished, and protected. It is designed to hide insecurity, shame, and an aching fear of being ordinary or unlovable. As long as others play their role, believing the story, reinforcing the image, the narcissist feels whole. But when someone steps back emotionally, clarity replaces confusion. Patterns become visible, manipulation is recognized. The charm no longer distracts. Being seen in this way is unbearable because it strips away the fantasy. It confronts them with the parts of themselves they spend a lifetime running from. Not rage, not tears, but awareness becomes the threat. When admiration fades and is replaced by quiet understanding, the narcissist feels exposed. There is no stage, no spotlight, no audience left to perform for. What cuts deepest is that this exposure doesn't come with confrontation. There is no dramatic accusation, no demand for accountability. Instead, there's a calm detachment that says, I see you clearly and I no longer need to engage. That realization destabilizes them because their identity depends on reflection. Without someone to mirror back the version they want to believe, they are left facing themselves. For the person who steps out of the illusion, this moment brings relief. Confusion turns into clarity. Self-doubt dissolves into self-trust. And while the narcissist struggles with the collapse of their image, the other person regains something far more valuable: truth. Truth doesn't shout or accuse, it simply stands still. And in its presence, the mask cannot survive. Once the mask has fallen and the illusion is no longer believed, something even more unsettling begins to happen. Distance creates space, and in that space, growth starts. What truly destabilizes a narcissist at this stage is not abandonment, but the realization that life continues and even flourishes without them. Their identity has been tied to the belief that they are essential, that they are the source of your strength, confidence, and direction. When that belief collapses, so does their sense of importance. A narcissist expects absence to cause collapse. They assume silence will lead to longing, that independence will turn into regret. Instead, when they witness healing, resilience, and joy emerging on the other side of detachment, it contradicts the narrative they rely on to feel superior. Your progress becomes evidence that their influence was never the foundation they imagined it to be. And that realization stings deeply because it forces them to confront a painful truth. They were not the center of your world. What makes this especially difficult for them is that growth cannot be controlled or rewritten. It doesn't argue back, it doesn't seek validation, it simply exists. When someone begins to stand taller, speak with confidence, and move forward with purpose, it quietly dismantles the narcissist's need to feel irreplaceable. They are left watching from the outside as the person they once dominated becomes self-sufficient. This is where envy often replaces control, not because the narcissist wants your happiness, but because it reflects their own lack of inner fulfillment. Your peace highlights their unrest. Your progress exposes their stagnation. And while they may attempt to minimize, discredit, or rewrite the story, the truth remains visible in your transformation. For the person who has stepped away, this growth is not an act of defiance, it is a natural return to self. Healing becomes a declaration without words. And in that quiet declaration lies something the narcissist can never reclaim: the certainty that you are always capable, even without them. As growth takes root and independence becomes visible, the final shift occurs, one that seals the separation completely. After control is lost, the mask exposed, and the illusion of importance shattered, what remains is indifference. Not hostility, not resentment, just emotional absence. And this is the point from which a narcissist cannot recover, because indifference removes the last thread connecting them to your inner world. A narcissist feeds on emotional energy. Even anger, disappointment, or confrontation still keeps them relevant, but indifference offers nothing to grasp. It communicates without cruelty or explanation that access has been revoked. There is no need to prove harm, no desire to be understood, no urge to be validated. The emotional door simply closes. For someone who measures their worth through reaction, this silence is devastating. What makes indifference so powerful is that it grows naturally out of healing. It is not a strategy or punishment, it is the byproduct of clarity, self-trust, and peace. Once you no longer need them to define you, approve of you, or acknowledge your growth, their presence loses its weight. They may attempt to provoke, to rewrite history, or to reinsert themselves through guilt or charm, but indifference neutralizes every tactic. There is nothing left to hook into. For the narcissist, this feels like erasure, not because you are cruel, but because you are unreachable. They cannot argue with calm. They cannot manipulate silence. They cannot dominate. Ease someone who has already moved on internally. This is the moment they realize they are no longer central to your emotional reality. For the person who is healed, indifference is freedom. It is the quiet confidence of knowing your worth no longer requires defense. Your peace becomes the final boundary. And unlike anger or explanation, it does not invite intrusion. It simply stands. And in that stillness, the narcissist is left behind, not defeated, but irrelevant. Once indifference settles in and emotional access is gone, something deeper is exposed: self-sufficiency. This is where the separation becomes irreversible. A narcissist can tolerate distance if they believe dependence still exists somewhere beneath it. What they cannot tolerate is the realization that you no longer need them at all. Not emotionally, not mentally, not for validation, direction, or identity. Self-sufficiency dismantles the final illusion. The narcissist's sense of power was rooted in being needed, in positioning themselves as the source of stability, confidence, or worth. When you become grounded within yourself, that role disappears. You stop looking outward for reassurance. You trust your own judgment. You regulate your own emotions. And in doing so, You unknowingly confront them with what they lack. This is why your healing feels so threatening to them. It highlights the emptiness they work tirelessly to avoid. While you are building an inner foundation, they are still searching for external REI. Enforcement. Your independence forces a comparison they never wanted to make. You are no longer surviving through attachment. You are living through alignment. And that contrast is painful. What unsettles them most is that self-sufficiency is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to be proven. It simply shows up in how you move, how you respond, how little chaos exists around you. You are no longer pulled into emotional storms. You no longer require someone else to stabilize your sense of self. That calm competence reminds them of their own reliance on others to feel whole. For you, self-sufficiency is not about isolation, it is about wholeness. It allows connection without dependency, love without loss of self, and peace without permission. For the narcissist, it is the final mirror, one that reflects not your absence, but their own inner void. And that is something no amount of charm, control, or manipulation can ever fill. And as that wholeness settles in, something becomes unmistakably clear. There is a difference between real connection and performance. Self-sufficiency doesn't close the heart, it refines it. It teaches you what genuine emotional depth feels like. And once you experience that authenticity, the narcissist's version of connection no longer satisfies. This is where their world collapses even further, because they cannot compete with what is real. A narcissist performs love the way an actor performs a role. The words may sound right, the gesture may appear convincing, but beneath it all is a transaction. Affection is given to gain admiration. Kindness is used to secure loyalty. Attention is offered with strings attached. For a long time, this performance can feel intense, even intoxicating. But intensity is not intimacy. Drama is not depth. When you begin to live from a grounded, self-sufficient place, you no longer confuse emotional chaos with passion. You recognize that real love feels safe, consistent, and mutual. It doesn't require you to abandon yourself to be chosen. This realization alone creates an unbridgeable gap. The narcissist cannot offer what they do not possess. Emotional presence without control. What destabilizes them is that authenticity cannot be faked for long. They rely on mirrors to reflect admiration back to them, but authentic connection does not revolve around an audience. It exists in honesty, vulnerability, and reciprocity, areas where narcissism struggles to survive. When you stop responding to theatrics and start valuing substance, their performance loses its power. For them, this is deeply threatening. They sense the shift. They feel the comparison, even if it's never spoken. Your ability to connect deeply, calmly, and honestly exposes the emptiness behind their emotional display. And while they may try to intensify the act, it only highlights the absence of truth behind it. For you, this moment is liberating. You no longer chase love that demands self-betrayal. You choose connection that feels real. And in doing so, you step into a kind of emotional richness the narcissist can observe, but never truly enter. And once authenticity becomes your standard, another shift naturally follows. Accountability enters the room. Real emotional depth does not exist without responsibility. Healthy connection requires the ability to reflect, to acknowledge harm, and to grow from it. This is where the narcissist's world becomes unbearably small, because accountability is the one place their performance cannot protect them. For a narcissist, being held accountable feels like an attack on their identity. It is not simply about admitting a mistake. It is about confronting the shame they have spent a lifetime avoiding. Their carefully maintained image depends on being blameless, misunderstood, or justified. So when authenticity exposes inconsistency and calm self-respect demands responsibility, they experience it as humiliation rather than growth. What makes this moment especially destabilizing is that accountability no longer arrives through confrontation. It arrives through contrast. You no longer argue or try to prove your pain. You simply stop accepting behavior that lacks integrity. Boundaries replace debates, consequences replace explanations. And in that quiet firmness, the narcissist is forced to face the reality that their actions have weight. They may respond with deflection, victimhood, or rage, but these reactions only confirm what accountability has revealed. Without the ability to self-reflect, they cannot repair. Without the courage to face their own flaws, they cannot evolve. And when they realize that you are no longer willing to absorb their behavior in the name of connection, the imbalance of power collapses. For you, accountability is not about punishment, it is about alignment. It is the natural extension of authenticity and self sufficiency. You are no longer willing to compromise your values to maintain proximity. You choose emotional honesty over emotional chaos. For the narcissist, this is unbearable because accountability exposes the gap between who they claim to be and how they actually behave. And once that gap is seen clearly, it cannot be unseen. No charm can erase it, no performance can cover it. The truth stands quietly, and they are left standing in front of it, unprotected. When accountability is no longer negotiable and your values remain intact, the narrative begins to shift in a way the narcissist never anticipated. They believe they were the author of your story, the one who defined your limits, your confidence, your future. But as you continue forward without them, thriving in alignment and self respect, that story rewrites itself. And watching that rewrite is something they cannot endure. A narcissist needs to believe that others succeed because of them or fail without them. This belief protects their fragile sense of superiority. So when you grow beyond their influence, when your life expands, your clarity sharpens, and your strength becomes visible. It directly contradicts the role they assign themselves in your life. Your success becomes evidence that their control was never the source of your potential. What unsettles them is not just that you are doing well, but that you are doing well without referencing them at all. You no longer explain your choices. You no longer seek validation for your progress. Your life moves forward naturally, quietly, confidently. This independence dismantles the fantasy that they were the center of your transformation. They may attempt to minimize your achievements, take credit for your growth, or dismiss your happiness as temporary. But none of that changes what they see. You are standing in your own power. Your peace, your confidence, your direction, all exist beyond their reach. And that reality creates a kind of psychological distance they cannot cross. For you, thriving is not revenge, it is a byproduct of alignment. It comes from choosing yourself consistently, from living according to your values rather than reacting to someone else's dysfunction. You are no longer proving anything, you are simply living. For the narcissist, this is devastating because it strips them of relevance. They are no longer the hero, the villain, or even the lesson. They are just a chapter, one you've already turned. And watching you thrive beyond that chapter forces them to confront the one thing they fear most, being unnecessary in a life that continue beautifully without them. And as that chapter closes and your life continues to expand, something solidifies into place: boundaries. Not walls built from anger, but lines drawn from self-respect. Boundaries are the quiet structure that allows your growth, peace, and clarity to last. And for a narcissist, they are not just limits, they feel like rejection of their very existence. A narcissist interprets boundaries as defiance. Where healthy people see them as guidance, narcissists see them as abandonment. That's because boundaries signal the end of unlimited access. They declare that your time, energy, and emotions are no longer available on demand. And once boundaries are calm, consistent, and enforced without guilt, manipulation loses its entry point. What makes boundaries especially threatening is their simplicity. They don't argue, they don't over-explain, they don't require emotional intensity to be effective. A clear no, a refusal to engage, or a decision made without justification removes the narcissist's ability to negotiate control. There is no longer a door to push against. For the narcissist, this feels like being erased from influence. They may test, provoke, or attempt to cross the line, hoping to trigger a reaction. But each time the boundary holds, the reality becomes undeniable. You are no longer accessible in the way you once were. The power dynamic has permanently shifted. For you, boundaries are not about shutting people out. They are about protecting you've built. They preserve your growth, your authenticity, and your emotional health. They allow connection only where there is respect. And with every boundary honored, your self-trust deepens. This is why boundaries are so final for a narcissist. They mark the moment where charm, guilt, and intimidation all fail. There is no argument left to win, no role left to play, just a calm, immovable line that says, "This is where I end and you begin." And that clarity is something they can never dismantle. And when those boundaries are no longer questioned or explained, when they simply exist as a natural extension of who you've become, the final shift arrives: peace. Not the fragile kind that depends on circumstances, but a deep, steady calm that lives inside you. This is the one thing a narcissist can never take, never control, and never understand. And because they cannot touch it, it breaks the last illusion of power they hold. Peace is threatening to a narcissist because it doesn't react, it doesn't defend itself, it doesn't rise to provocation. Where chaos once gave them leverage, stillness now leaves them powerless. Your calm becomes a mirror that reflects their unrest, and that contrast is unbearable. They are accustomed to pulling people into emotional storms where they can dominate the narrative. Peace refuses to enter the storm at all. What makes this so final is that peace cannot be negotiated. You don't argue your way into it, and you don't explain it to anyone else. It is the result of everything that came before: clarity, self-sufficiency, authenticity, accountability, growth, and boundaries, all settling into alignment. By the time peace arrives, there is nothing left for the narcissist to latch onto. They may attempt one last provocation, one last reach for relevance, but peace renders those efforts invisible. There is no emotional fuel left to extract, no reaction to harvest, no access point remaining. And in that moment, they realize something they have avoided their entire lives: they are no longer central to your emotional world. For you, peace is not withdrawal from life, it is full presence within it. You move without fear of being pulled backward. You respond instead of react. You trust yourself. And that inner stability becomes the loudest statement you will ever make. This is why peace is the final breaking point for a narcissist. They cannot invade it, they cannot perform within it, they cannot survive without disrupting it. And when they realize you have found it without them, they are left with the truth they can never escape: you are free, and their power is gone. And when peace becomes your constant companion, something even more profound emerges: a power that is quiet yet unstoppable. This is the final truth that a narcissist can never face. Your peace is your permanence. It is not conditional on them, their attention, or their approval. It exists independently, fully rooted in the life you have reclaimed. And for someone who thrives on disruption, manipulation, and control, this is the ultimate undoing. They are accustomed to being the center of emotional gravity, expecting reactions, loyalty, and validation at every turn. Every argument, every drama, every airy plea for attention was a way to maintain relevance. But when you exist in unwavering peace, they are rendered irrelevant. Your happiness, your confidence, your stability no longer depend on their presence or their approval. You have become self-contained, resilient, and untouchable in the ways that truly matter. What makes this so devastating to them is that peace cannot be negotiated, challenged, or stolen. You cannot argue with it, you cannot manipulate it, and you cannot control it. It simply is. It is the result of every choice you've made to honor yourself, every boundary you've drawn, every step of growth you've taken without them, every moment of self-sufficiency you've embraced. Peace is both a shield and a statement. It is calm in action, unshakable in intention. For you, this is freedom in its purest form. It is the quiet joy of no longer being tethered to someone else's chaos, the liberation of walking fully in your truth. And for the narcissist, it is unbearable. They may still try to provoke, to insert themselves, to reclaim attention, but they have no foothold. The power is gone. The drama no longer feeds them. The influence they thought they had simply evaporates in the presence of your unwavering inner strength. This is the culmination of every step you have taken: peace. It is your victory without struggle, your statement without words, and the one thing a narcissist can never get over, because it proves, without question, that your life no longer revolves around them. You are free, you are whole, and nothing they do can ever touch that again. And now, as we come to the close of this journey together, I want you to pause and let it sink in. What we've explored is not just about narcissist control or manipulation. It's about something far bigger. It's about your life, your freedom, and your power. Every step we've walked through, the loss of control, the exposure of the mask, your growth beyond their reach, the calm of indifference, self-sufficiency, authenticity, accountability, thriving without them, clear boundaries, and ultimately peace, is a roadmap. A roadmap not for confrontation, not for revenge, but for reclaiming yourself in the most profound, transformative way. Think about it. Each stage is a lesson in resilience. Each boundary drawn, each moment of silence, each act of self respect chips away at the illusion that someone else can define your worth. And here's the truth that few people ever dare to say aloud: nothing can hurt you as much as giving up your power to someone who doesn't deserve it. When you choose yourself, when you stop reacting to manipulation, when you allow your growth and peace to flourish, you demonstrate a strength they can never touch. And that, my friends, is freedom. So as you move forward, remember this: the journey is not about breaking them, it's about building yourself. Every choice you make to honor your boundaries, every decision to embrace authenticity, every moment you live fully in your peace becomes a declaration that your life belongs to you, not to their drama, not to their approval, not to their control. Stay with that thought. Let it guide you, let it inspire you, and let it remind you that the most powerful thing you can ever do is live fully, fearlessly, and on your own terms. Because when you do, the person who once held your world together becomes nothing more than a chapter in your story, a chapter you have outgrown beautifully. And that is the story worth watching, worth living, and worth sharing.